Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I actually want to talk to you about what makes somebody innovative. So we often hear about these particular terms like an innovator, an inventor, a creative person. But, we often are a little bit confused in what these are, and it truly is confusing, and it took me a long time to figure out what they are in my own mind. So I thought I'd just kind of talk about what that is. So I'm actually a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and this is something that is pretty important. And I think even in the research world, it is still, we do know what these things are, but it's very difficult to sort of figure out what makes something more innovative, or somebody an innovator, or somebody an inventor or not an inventor compared to the others. And I'm just going to kind of give you a brief overview of what these things are, and give you a couple of examples of these. So of these two particular categories, just to kind of let what are some of these distinctions and stuff like that, because there's a lot of confusion out there. So, what is somebody that is creative? So a creative person is just generally somebody that creates simply a lot of ideas. They don't necessarily apply these particular ideas in any sort of way. They're not building these particular ideas, but they just generate ideas, which is perfectly fine. And that is the basis for somebody that becomes an inventor, right? And we don't necessarily know. We think that the inventors generate ideas, but they also have to not only create ideas, but they have to put these ideas and convert them into a particular product, a new product, some sort of new tool or process or something like that. And generally what they generally tend to do, an inventor, more often than not, they are solving their own problem. So what they're doing is they're just simply looking at the things that they have around them, and they're solving a particular problem, and then they just address that particular problem. And if you stick around for a couple of minutes, I've got a kind of a fun, interesting example of this. I think it's fun and interesting. Then, there is, after that, when somebody sort of invents something, creates a new product, something along those lines, they then can become an innovator. And an innovator is someone who, whether it's intentionally, sometimes people are very intentional about this kind of stuff, or unintentionally, they create a product, some new product, tool, service, whatever it is, something that's new, and it has commercial intent. So they can actually get out and sell this particular thing. It actually does sell, and with any luck, it sort of changes the product category, or changes the particular thing that they're addressing. And it could be in any particular industry. It could be something that's really major. It could be like an innovation, like an iPhone, for example. The whole Steve Jobs example. That's really major. But it also could be something really small and very specific in a particular product category. So, for example, a new type of scalpel that a physician might use. A physician might say, they might create a new scalpel that sort of fits their hand a little bit better for whatever particular thing that they're doing, right? And then they go and somebody sees at the hospital, some other surgeon sees at the hospital, they're like, wow, that's a really cool tool. It works very well. Where can I get one of those? And then this particular physician says, well, I created it myself, and you might be able to get one from me, right? Well, it's a little bit more rigorous than that, obviously, in a hospital, but actually back in the day it wasn't, but now it's a lot more rigorous. But then they create this thing, or then they start interacting with a medical device company, like a legitimate large company, and that medical device company licenses it out, and then pretty soon they're selling it across the United States, across Canada, across Europe, across the Middle East, all over Asia, and pretty soon it becomes this big thing, right? That it is an innovation that is completely commercially viable, And this physician just kind of stumbled into it. And that's totally normal. In fact, that's a really normal process of how people actually become innovators compared to sort of the intentional way where they sort of seek out to do something and they sort of pursue that particular thing. That's actually relatively rare from what I understand, right? And I don't know everything. I'm just kind of bumbling along just like you are. So what are some of the examples of inventors and innovators? So I think, a perfect example of an inventor is my dad. Probably it's somebody that's like your dad. He was, he's a really inventive person. I grew up in a Northern Ontario town, so a lot of these things kind of applied to Northern Ontario, but he had, he actually set up, he had a large garden that was outside, and deer and, all sorts of animals would come by at night and eat all the carrots and lettuce and things like that. So he actually created a booby trap where an alarm would go off whenever one of these things would stumble into his garden. He had it all wired up, and an alarm would sound, and he would scare off the animals, and then he'd go out there and check out what's going on. So that was a really interesting example. He created all sorts of sleighs and stuff like that for, the Skidoo that we used. There was all sorts of really fun and interesting things that he would do and build around the house. He built, just all sorts of stuff, mostly with like wooden things. Sometimes he'd weld things together. But, in general, that's an example of an inventor, right? It's somebody that has a problem that they like to solve and they just solve it. And usually it is solving their own particular problem. It is not typically, we think of somebody that is going out and, like a Thomas Edison, that they're going out or something along those lines and producing all these patents and stuff like that. That's really rare. That's a small portion of the population that would actually do that. Most people are just kind of inventors on their own. And then, this is sort of in contrast to an innovator. We know about these large examples like Elon Musk, right? That actually goes out and creates PayPal and does this very intentionally. But, there's other examples that are less known, but really important as well. For example, this guy, John Sullivan, I bet you've never heard of him, but every one of you have used this particular innovation. And he was the inventor of Keurig, or the K-Cups. And, it was just a matter of fiddling around with these sort of disposable cups. And he didn't realize that it was going to become such a big thing and that virtually every office around the world is going to start using K-Cups. He had no idea that would actually be the case, but he did that. So as you can see, the idea behind somebody's inventor or an innovator or creative person is really just depends on degrees of intent and things like that. So, you just have to sort of pay attention to that and, what causes somebody to be an inventor versus an innovator. I personally think there's a lot of luck involved that are not necessarily, it's hard to explain. And a lot of it is just somebody that's curious and just mucking around with something for a long time until it actually takes off. And that's really what it is, right? That's at the end of the day, that's really what it is. And sometimes it takes off. Sometimes it just satisfies your own particular problem that you have, and that's fine. And then sometimes it solves a problem and then, it becomes a viable commercial thing. And then it becomes much bigger from that. Really at the end of the day, that's probably the best thing that we know in terms of how all this stuff works. You can't necessarily say it's one particular sort of characteristic of an individual, because there's so much randomness that goes on behind the scenes that we don't necessarily see. So in general, I think that's it. They're just solving a problem. They're getting out there, they're doing that thing, and sometimes it becomes commercially viable. And, somebody else, they get a whole team of people that are looking to see, and they find that it's actually commercially viable. And somebody says, you should actually take this to the market, and they take it to the market and it becomes a big thing. And then that becomes an innovation or they become an innovator, right? Because then they end up changing their little small product market and then maybe a larger market beyond that. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully you like this video. Give me a thumbs up if you like it, and do watch the other videos and subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, take care. Bye.